Nerd Show. I am Marcus Blake, and we are speaking with director Indy Saini, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I apologize if I'm not, for her film, Women in the Front Seat, about women motorcycle enthusiasts. So it's a pleasure to have you with us, Indy. And I did say your name correctly.
Yeah, last name is close. It's Saini.
Oh, well, okay, well.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on your show.
Nature of the beast, we're not always perfect, but we roll with it anyway. And that's a lesson to every filmmaker out there. You just got to roll with it. And no, we're not making puns about motorcycles yet. So, all right. This was a great film. I am not a motorcycle person per se, even though I once worked at a biker radio station, and that's a whole nother can of worms. I didn't realize there were so many women enthusiasts breaking the gender stereotypes. I just want to dive in. How did this project come about? Are you a motorcycle rider yourself?
I am. I've been riding since my early 20s, and like it was a transformational experience for me. And I've always loved riding and ride whenever I can. And prior to making the film, I'd only ever ridden with men.
Right.
And but I knew that the number of women riders was growing, and I've been watching the statistics evolve and the manufacturers beginning to cater a little bit to women's merchandise and stuff like that in a really small way, but that's also been growing. And as I
Right.
was watching the statistics grow, I really felt compelled to make some sort of content about it. And I had pitched it a few times in the past and had it not, nobody saw the great potential that I did. And
Right.
eventually I just decided to go out and make the film myself. So,
Well, sometimes you got to hit the road and just kind of do it indie style, and just put it all together. Again, and I apologize to our audience that I don't know enough about motorcycles. I know two brands. Well, actually, I take that back. I know three. But so you've been riding since your early 20s. How did you get into it?
I actually, my first experience on a motorcycle was when I was 7 years old. I'm half Punjabi. My dad is from India. And we used to go visit family in India like every 3 years when I was growing up. My first time was when I was 7. And I mean, motorcycles in India, like everybody has a bike. It's basically the family car. Most people only have a bike, and so you often find like families of four on a motorcycle. And sometimes they're, pets, or, it's just like, and all of their groceries. And so my cousin used to take me to the movies and take me to swimming lessons and stuff like that on the motorcycle, and I'd be in like my shorts and my flip flops. And it just like, I never thought twice about it. It wasn't something scary. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to get on a bike and do this thing. And it was just like part of everyday reality. And I think like it just sort of got into my DNA at that point, So then when I had an opportunity to learn, I was dating somebody in my early 20s who was a big sports guy and was really into like all kinds of adventurous sports, skiing and paragliding. And he was like, let's get a motorcycle. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. So yeah, he bought the bike, and he'd already been riding, and he taught me how to ride. And it was instead of like a street bike, he wanted to get something that was more adventurous. So we got a Suzuki Enduro. So it was like on off-road. And so from the very beginning, I was sort of learning to navigate, not just roads, but gravel and some difficult, more, tougher conditions. So it was really good for me to kind of, jump right in like that.
Right. Well, I mean, that's kind of interesting because I mean, it's very much a male dominated type world, and there's still that kind of misogyny that goes with it, that women belong in the back seat or in a sidecar. So
Right.
yeah, getting to having a boyfriend teach you, as an equal, um, even today, and you would think that we were more progressive in our society, but even today, you just don't hear about it. And I freely admit that there was a lot that I didn't know, and now I am very curious about how it has changed after watching the film. So how did you go about finding all the subjects and all the women that you interviewed in this film?
So, I mean, that was like something that was just kind of amazing to me. I mean, I knew I wanted to do, I mean, I basically was like, okay, I'm going to go out and just get on my bike and with my camera and see who I can meet. And I just started talking to people about doing the ride and doing the film. I mean, at the time when I started, I didn't even know it was going to be a film. I thought it was going to just be like a docuseries of profile pieces of, the handful of women I met. I didn't know I
Right.
was going to meet like dozens and dozens and dozens of amazing women. But it was literally like I would meet somebody and they'd be like, "Oh, where are you going next?" And I was like, "Wherever somebody is willing to talk to me, that's where I'm going next." And so I didn't, the only plan that I had was that eventually I started in Boston. I bought the bike there. And my only plan was that eventually I was gonna get back to LA where I lived. So
Right.
that was the plan. And then between those two locations, it literally was whoever told me about somebody, and that person was like, "Oh, I'm free this day and that day." And so I was like doing a little bit of zigzagging and to match up with other people's schedules. And it just sort of like snowballed like that. The more people I talked to, the more people kind of got on board and, started to get a sense of who I was and what I was doing. And they were sharing, I met some people who were really deeply rooted in the motorcycle community, a couple of people who worked
Right.
in parts of the industry and knew other people or rode with several different riding groups that were like national, and so they knew people in other places in the country because of that national group. And
Right.
so it just kept rolling like that.
Well, you have a very eclectic group of women that you interviewed for this. That I mean, definitely all walks of life. I think the one that I found more fascinating, and I forget her name in the film, so I apologize. The redhead who talked about getting a
Tamale.
bike. Yeah. Then when she got divorced and just went to the world, and I mean, was writing in China, I was like, you know, some might call that a midlife crisis or whatever, but I'm like, that's kind of just changing your life and going off on an adventure. And that's, I think that's kind of what everybody should experience, especially if you are getting out of a relationship or wanting something new. But to take that cross and to do it in other countries. Anyway, that was one of the more fascinating ones that I enjoyed. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like her story was so amazing because I mean, I think for a lot of people, like when they lose a big relationship like a marriage,
Right.
it's the first thing they want to do is be with somebody else because that pain of being alone is so hard.
Right.
Um, and so, that the idea of being on a motorcycle, and I had heard this from other people too. Another woman I met whose husband died, like she did her mourning while riding,
Mhm.
so I feel the bike is very healing for a lot of people. And so for Allison, who you're talking about, who, she, being on that bike, like helped her reconnect with herself. And,
Right.
I, and then she got rid of the bug, like doing all the trips in the US, and then it just kept expanding like out into other countries.
Oh, wow. I mean, I guess that's the difference between men and women. Men, they tend to go for somebody younger and get a sports car. And she has the better story, like a bigger adventure. It's like, well, fine, you can have that, but I'm going to China and riding a bike.
Right.
um, but yeah, I mean, again, just everybody from different walks of life and stuff. Now, you talk about that. Was it kind of hard, finding everybody in the beginning?
I would say, I mean, it wasn't hard at all, which was sort of surprising to me. And the other like really surprising thing was that when I met like everybody that I met in the film and interviewed, when I met them, it was the first time that I met them, you
Right.
know. So, and I didn't, because I was riding and sometimes I was doing, 500 miles a day. So, it wasn't like I was on the phone doing pre-interviews or anything, which, if I had managed to have like a expanded schedule, or I don't know, had a team with me that was helping produce it, then that probably would have been really helpful. But a lot of the, basically everybody I met, I was interviewing them the same day. And so I was just amazed at how open the women were.
Yeah.
So they really like they opened the door into their homes and then into their lives. And then they just got on board with the film. And so, the only time that there was a moment where I didn't know where I was going to go or who I was going to meet. I was in Chicago, and I was supposed to go to New Orleans. I was going to meet up with the Carmel Curves, which is this amazing riding group.
Right.
And it was Friday, and I called the leader of the group and was like, "So you guys all good for Sunday?" And she was like, "Do you not have news where you are? Like, there's a hurricane coming and we're being evacuated." And I was like pretty horrified that I was so clueless, You know? But
So
I had been
hard.
writing and interviewing and literally just not paying attention to the outside world. And so obviously I wasn't going to the South to meet them. So then I
Right.
was like, what am I going to do? And I just got on the internet and I was like, what's near here? And found this young motorcycle group in Kansas City and cold emailed the group leader, Casey. And she was like, oh, well, let me see if anybody's around on Sunday. And then within a few hours, she's like, yeah, a bunch of the girls can get together. Come on by. And it turned out to be amazing. Like 12 people showed up and they were super cool. And yeah, it was great.
Well, one of the things I kind of know about, a couple of years ago, the big Oscar winner, Nomad or Nomadland, with
Yeah.
people that live in vans and all that, and it was an interesting film and that kind of lifestyle. But I felt like this was a little bit more poignant because all the travel you talk about, just being on a bike, like you'll be in Chicago one day and then you'll ride all the way to New Orleans within a couple of days or Kansas City, and that seems more nomadic to me than living in a van. And that's something that we just don't hear about, women doing.
Right.
So getting to motorcycles, these are the questions for the motorcycle enthusiast. Do you have a particular brand, that you favor more than than anything else? I know there's Harley people, there's, the Indian motorcycles and stuff, but is there one for you?
Well, my current bike is an Indian. It's an Indian Scout, and it's a cruiser, and it's super comfortable and has a big cushy seat. And it's not a super heavy bike. It's like 550 pounds, so it's mid-weight, and it's really comfortable to ride, and I love it. It's my first Indian bike. But I definitely like I'm a fan of their designs overall. Like I like sort of the vintage look to, just like the design of it and everything.
Right.
Um, so, I was really happy to find that bike and get that bike. But I have to say, like, doing the film and all the other women I met, I mean, I was surprised at the variation in all the bikes. I mean, everybody, tends to customize their bikes in their own unique way. But even just I mean, I saw brands and styles that I was unfamiliar with, and
Right.
um,
Well, and that's kind of where I was going is, you probably got introduced to a lot of different things. Again, we know the big brands. Harley is the go-to. That's the one everybody knows.
yeah,
But the customization and the things that we hear men talking about it, but I would think that there's a lot more that goes into it with women riders.
yeah,
So that was probably kind of an interesting educational experience for you from a motorcycle standpoint.
absolutely, yeah. And also, like, in terms of the customizations, like we were talking about Allison earlier, as she started to do these like bigger and longer international trips, she was, ended up getting this adventure bike and outfitting it with literally like 100 pounds of gear.
Yeah,
So she's got like, the cases and all of because she can fix a bike, to quite a like a really impressive degree. So she's got all of her tools and, for flat tires and oil changes and all that kind of stuff. So all of that like adds weight. And then you're customizing the bike, to accommodate like how you want to ride it with all this other stuff that you also have
right.
on it, So that to me was pretty cool. I mean, I have to say I'm kind of my nature is that I tend to wing things a little bit. I'm
Right.
not I learned a lot from these women about being more prepared because I wasn't as prepared. Even on that ride, I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. But it's literally like there's tools for everything. Like when on my
Right.
bike, there was a lot of vibration, and if I had really thought about it in advance, like there are actual things that you can put on your handlebars to reduce the vibration.
I do want to say that in the nerd world, we talk about customization of bikes. We just automatically think that's the Bat bike. That's Batman's bike and all the customization he probably did. And I looked at some of these bikes and I'm like, the nerd in me is thinking that could be Batman's bike or Robin's. So it was
Right.
it was impressive. Um, of all the places that you went, what were some of your favorites that, I mean, I know everybody, it's a wonderful story and the people you met, but is there some places that you gravitated to more or loved more visiting and
Um, well, I'm a big traveler in general, so and working in the film industry, I've worked in a lot of places. But riding wise, I have to say, like, I thought it was really cool to ride in Chicago. I hadn't been, most of when I've gone out riding, I tend to go out into nature and, I do a lot of like driving through farmlands, and I really like sort of the scenic experience of being on a
right.
bike and being away from other cars and just being in nature and with the winds. And um, so, I mean, it was kind of cool to be with a group of urban riders
Yeah.
and, um, experiencing that with them. And it was like, we're going over like these bridges with this grading and, like all these taxis are darting in and out. And I'm like, okay, this is different.
Well, I know what you mean. That's actually where I'm originally from. So I know people that I know a lot of urban riders that they love to live in the city and they're not going to own a car. They're not going to. It's easier to park a bike and get around. But everything outside, when you get to the burbs, and that's the funny thing about Illinois. It's like you have this whole metropolitan area, but once you start getting outside, you realize kind of how rural Illinois really is. The further south that you drive, and it's gorgeous and farmers and stuff like that. I've definitely enjoyed it the times that I've taken road trips from Texas to Chicago. But so in terms of the bikes and everything, have you been approached by some of these motorcycle companies? I mean, I feel like now this is a great opportunity for sponsorship. Like here are I've showed you all of this world of women writers and stuff. Have you been approached by some of these companies for anything?
Um, I have I'm talking to a bunch of different companies. More so about like presenting the film at like different rallies and
Right.
events and sort of like, sharing the stories.
Sure.
Um, not so much about like branding or anything like that. I mean, it was important to me in the film to do something that was brand agnostic,
Right.
brand, have it be totally open, and so people could experience sort of like, the diversity of all the different bikes.
Yeah. Well, I asked because you've basically shown in a great film. Here is this market. And here is a whole new audience that you should cater to, and it's getting bigger. So, all right. So we have come to the last question of our interview, and it is, like I said, our nerd question. So here you go. You ready? All right.
Okay. Yes. Ready.
If you could have a superpower or a weapon of choice from within the nerd universe to fight the forces of evil, what would you choose?
Oh, wow. Oh, a superpower to fight evil. Um,
Told you it's the one you're not prepared for.
yeah, completely not prepared for that. Um, I would say it would be like, this is gonna sound, it would be like the ability to create like fairy dust.
All right. Okay.
That could sprinkle like, here's the truth of Indy, that could sprinkle like love and peace so that people could experience like, the best life that they want to have.
Basically, I'm just imagining you full throttle like Tom Cruise, but with dust out the back, spraying love and
Totally out the exhaust.
yeah. I'm the I'm the love maverick. Love
Yes.
and